Europe, 1914. The situation is almost the exact same as it is in our timeline, except for the fact that Britain does not guarantee Belgium's independence. In 1914, Austria-Hungary declares war on Serbia for the shooting of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and this leads to Russia and France joining on the side of Serbia, while Germany joins on the side of Austria-Hungary. Germany executes the Schleswig Plan through Belgium and Luxembourg, which does fail, but Britain does not join the war and does not send any troops to help France at all. There are two major effects of Britain not joining the war. The first major effect is that Italy would not join World War I. Italy joined World War I because Britain and France promised them economic as well as munitions aid, but in this timeline, Britain would not provide Italy with anything, and they would not be able to get enough aid and munitions from just France alone, especially considering that British troops would not be helping French troops in the Western Front. This would force France to garrison the Italian border, taking those troops away from the Western Front. The second major impact of Britain not joining the war would be no Royal Navy, leading to no turn-up winter, no sinking of Lusitania, as there's no reason to resort to unrestricted submarine warfare, as well as the Central Powers not starving. This was extremely beneficial and would help Germany win the war due to increased morale on the home front, as well as no American entry into World War II. Finally, this would let the Central Powers win the war because of the combined forces of Austria-Hungary, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire being able to easily crush the collapsing Russian Empire, as well as the French Republic standing all on its own. This is a possible map of what Europe would look like after the peace treaty, with Germany being the economic center as well as the center of Europe overall.
In days of yore from Britain's shore, Wolfe the dauntless hero came and planted firm Britannia's flag on.
One of the most prominent effects of participating in a global conflict is a lot of death. World War I took a toll of around 66,000 dead Canadians and over 172,000 wounded, and countless more suffering trauma out of the 650,000 enlisted in the Canadian Expeditionary Force. Another fatal consequence of war was the spread and epidemic of the Spanish flu developing across the world. 2 million Canadians contracted it out of its population of 8 million, meaning 1 in 4 Canadians had it. 50,000 Canadians died of the flu across all communities rather than just those enlisted. The immediate benefit of never having joined the war would be none of these casualties. These deaths and injuries never happening means Canada's population flourishes and there would be much less trauma and depression in Canadian society. Families would stay full, factories won't be scouring for workers, exports would keep flowing out, and fields would remain tended.
Had Germany won the war, it is safe to say that Europe would have been a far different German-dominated continent. France's Versailles Treaty inflicted more pain onto the already crippled, war-torn Germans, with the reparation payments and a large-scale reduction of military forces. Without the desire for revenge, the rise of Hitler would have been far less likely, subsequently stopping the mass acts of terror on Jewish people. Although the humanitarian crisis that would have been avoided is far more important, Canada would have seen a large economic benefit in this outcome. Canada's debt post-World War I was only about $2.4 billion. However, after doubling from the Great Depression, this figure reached $18 billion by the end of World War II. This debt, which continues to cripple our economy, could very well have been avoided, perhaps looking far ahead into issues like the housing crisis. However, the bigger economic benefit lies in the Great Depression. America, with the hopes of a long-term profit on the beaten-down German economy, floated millions of dollars from their economy to lend to Germany in large sums. Much like an institutionally owned credit swap, investors regularly invested with borrowed money. The consequences of this are very clear. Bill Hwang recently fell victim to this leverage and lost over $20 billion as a single person in 10 days. Likewise, Black Thursday was followed by Black Monday, followed even then by Black Tuesday. The American gamble on the German economy spurred massive investor confidence and a gambling attitude. Canada, already hurt by its own investors, was then brought down with America as it raised tariffs astronomically to balance out the money lost as bank after bank defaulted. The capitulation of the German economy and the golden years gave Canada's economy a false sense of security and could have been prevented if citizens were to understand money requires more work than funding large-scale governmental gambling.
So, let's talk about what would have happened to Canada as a nation. What we believe may have happened is that Canada may still have just been a British puppet, a British dominion, not an independent nation like the Statute of Westminster ratified, and nothing like the independent country we are today. This is because the Atlantic Charter, ratified in 1941, would never have happened because of the fact that it is unlikely there would be a Second World War with France instead of Germany, especially considering that Germany would be occupying France's steel and coal region of Alsace-Lorraine, and in addition, that Germany would be extremely strong in Europe. Secondly, because there would be no World War II, this charter would most likely never have happened, and this charter was the main thing that said that it would give self-determination and independence to all these different regions, such as Africa, and allowing the people in those regions to have self-determination instead of having a foreign nation governing them. If Roosevelt and Churchill never signed this charter, most likely decolonization would have happened a lot slower, and to this day, it would have been possible for Canada to still just be a dominion of the British Empire. Also, the UK would never have signed the Statute of Westminster, which is pretty obvious because they would have never had like these Canadian contributions in World War I, which would even give them the right to be like a nation or to be seen as equal on the world stage and not just a British puppet. So at this point, Canada could still just be a dominion, but we would not be economically weak. We would still have some form of our economy, and we would still be somewhat around the same nation as we are today, considering that the British would have aided in our economic development, and we still would have had a degree of autonomy just because the British Empire can't manage everything.
It was here on Vimy Ridge we showed the world what courage is.
Canada's role in World War I was a great source of national pride because Canada was able to win major victories for the Allies. Some of those victories include the Battle of Vimy Ridge and the famous 100 Days that led to the Allies emerging victorious over the Central Powers. And for those victories, Canadian soldiers were being led by Canadian generals for the first time. Some of those generals were Sir Arthur Currie that introduced new and unconventional battle tactics that helped win the war. And so Canadians were fighting for Canada, they were fighting for their country, rather than fighting for the UK. So this sprouted the sense of nationalism that Canadians feel toward their country, and over time it evolved into civic nationalism that has helped make Canada an inclusive country. If Canada had not fought in the First World War, then Canadians would still feel connected to Britain as their mother country, and so they wouldn't feel any duty to their fellow citizens in Canada. They'd feel more connected to Britain across the ocean. And so it can be argued that without Canada's contribution in World War I, it wouldn't become such a prominent country with people that fight for equality around the world.